Welcome to Teaching Artist Podcast, a show dedicated to discussions of teaching art to kids, making art, and how those things overlap and feed each other. I'm Rebecca Potts, your host, a visual arts teaching artist. Each week, I'm sharing a featured artist as well as a guest interview. I'll share a bit about the featured artist here, as well as sharing images of their work on Instagram and on the website. This week's featured artist is Jerry Niemiroko. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhere close to right. So he is a multimedia artist from Plainville, Connecticut. He studied illustration at Central Connecticut State University while interning at the New Britain Museum of American Art Collections Department. His recent work explores the concept of personal space. In his artist statement, Jerry says, "Interior personal spaces have been the subject of my recent work. What someone keeps in their space is a direct reflection of their interests and passions. A person is allowed to be who they are without fear of judgment or acceptance. It's a very special moment when someone invites you into their own personal sanctuary, the significance of which is often lost to a million other social scenarios. It's important for everyone to have a space where they feel completely comfortable to express who they really are. In today's society, we often have to wear many different hats or play some sort of character of ourselves." And I feel like that statement is so resonant right now while we're all Zooming from our personal space, seeing students want to either, I often see my daughter wanting to show off everything or other students wanting to, turn their cameras off and not be so vulnerable. So this connection to personal space has like a double meaning right now. So you can view more of Jerry's work on our blog, teachingartistpodcast.com/featured artists, or his website is www.jerryniemiroko.com. And I will link to this. Would you like to be featured? You can head over to our website to submit your work at teachingartistpodcast.com/opportunities. Justin Bursk talked about embracing imperfections and wrestling with the work. He shared how his time has shifted over the years, from pushing through an MFA program while parenting two small children, to seeing that time open up as his children become adults. I loved hearing about the metaphors in his work and the idea of moving mountains in his small sculptures built precariously onto wind-up toys. He uses shapes, line, and color so intentionally, along with his signature 2 circles representing eyes or binoculars and the idea of looking. It was inspiring to hear how he keeps a positive attitude during this challenging time while teaching hybrid from a cart. Whew! Justin Bursk lives, works, and plays in his hometown with the help of his family and 600 students. He has taught in Neshaminy School District for 25 years at every level, most recently at Herbert Hoover Elementary for the past 10 years. Justin has exhibited locally and nationally, including Hyde Park Art Center in Chicago, Seton Hall University in New Jersey, the Firehouse in New York, and locally at Vox Populi Philadelphia and the Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Pennsylvania. He attended Tyler School of Art at Temple University, where he received a BFA in painting and an art education certificate, and he attended the University of the Arts for an MFA in painting. Let's hear from Justin. I am talking with Justin Bursk today, and I would love to hear more about your background. I feel like it's always a good starting point just to hear kind of how you got into both teaching and art, and then also where those two started to overlap.
Okay, no problem. I'd say I always liked making things, when I was little. I didn't really think about being an artist when I was really small, I'd say elementary and even into middle school. But then we had to pick a major in our ninth grade year.
Oh.
And I was going to do drafting because I liked construction and building things. But my one friend told me that there was a lot of math involved with that and that I should be an art major with him. So I ended up signing up to be an art major with him. And that kind of kept going from there. And then in high school, I was not a very good student, but, I was interested in art. And my father teaches at the local community college. So he talked me into taking some art classes at the community college level while I was at high school. And that pretty much provided me with a portfolio that got me into college because my grades weren't going to get me there. And then once I started going to Tyler School of Art, everything just kind of kept going from there. I was a painting major. And then roughly, I'd say my junior year, my parents talked to me about what I wanted to do after I got out. Because, you're not really going to make a living off being a painter, especially if you wanted things like a house or, those kind of things. And my whole family's teachers. So they said, what do you think about teaching? And I'm pretty easygoing. So I said, sure, I'll give it a try. So I joined the education department along with the painting department. So it was kind of like a dual major. And both departments kind of discouraged being with the other. They're like, you have to choose to be a painter or you have to choose to be a teacher. And, at that point in my life, that just kind of made me want to try to do both. So I stuck with it and went right out of college and started substituting. And I've been teaching for about 25 years now. And I've continued my studio practice over the course of those 25 years as well.
Yeah, amazing. And what do you feel like has helped you the most in being able to continue both things?
I think they're mutually inspiring. As a teacher, I get to play with a lot of materials and struggle with a lot of students, which is a lot like being in the studio. And the studio has always kind of been a release as well as kind of a place to explore my own little ideas and my materials as well. And I've just had to kind of adjust my expectations of what being an artist and a teacher at the same time means. I'm exhausted, so I don't participate in a lot of shows. I don't really need to make a living off my art. So that kind of gives me the chance to do whatever I want, which has been, very nice. But at the same time, you get jealous of those people that you see, friends that are more business savvy and put more time into the business side of art. But then, it ebbs and it flows. It ebbs and it flows.
Yeah. Do you feel like school holiday times are when you get a lot of time in the studio, or is it more of sort of a break from it all?
I'd say yes, like the summertime when I have, and 25 years, I've only been able really financially to take the last, I'd say 3 or 4 summers off. But still, you're not as exhausted with all the lesson planning and all that stuff. So those breaks have given me the chance to really delve in a little deeper. This year, I've been able to kind of structure my studio time as just like I've been calling them small changes. So that's how I post it on Instagram. If I just get in the studio for a half an hour, I just make a couple small moves on a painting. It's satisfying and I can say, it feels good that you really just put in a little bit of time.
Yeah. And seeing that needle move just a little bit more and a little bit more, it also kind of inspires you to keep going back and doing those small moves.
Yes. And then you realize that they're really, big moves for you a lot of times. And it just keeps the practice moving forward, which is really what you shoot for.
Yeah. And then in terms of teaching, what is your kind of teaching style?
I'd say I'm very process-based, very playful. I really push experimentation, and I really kind of try to push. I tell my little kids all the times, you're not going to give this to your grandmother for her birthday. It's not that special. It's just for fun. It's just an exercise. Let's just have fun with it and move on, because they get so frustrated with what they expect the artwork to end up looking like. So, for me, I'd give up grading altogether if I could. I feel like, especially in the arts, you can gauge your development through seeing how you use those materials from in kindergarten versus how you use them in fourth grade. And it's usually undeniable. So I don't really push too much on, if it has these 3 colors, you get these many points, And all of my students have such unique ways about them that comparing themselves to each other, I find to be a problem as well. So I try to explain to them, yours is not supposed to look like theirs. So a very free and open dialogue in my classroom.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really encouraging space for kids to have that sort of freedom and, encouragement just to be who they are.
Yes, exactly. And understand that their differences are important and we celebrate them.
Yes, absolutely. And you're teaching K through 12 now, or are you just elementary?
I'm teaching kindergarten through fourth grade. So the first 5 years of my career, I was lucky to have a lot of long-term subs positions. So I jumped from elementary to middle school to high school to teaching to subbing everything all the time for a year. Yeah. Then I got lucky and there was a photo position at the high school and nobody else really wanted to teach photo. So I was able to move up there and I spent 10 years building a program there and actually got to get away from photo and back to painting, which I love. And then after 10 years, the population went down and the number of kids that were signing up for art classes went down. So I was low man on the totem pole. So I got bumped down to elementary and broke my heart. But once you get there and you get used to it again, you fall in love with that too. So now I've been there for about 10 years.
Yeah. And do you feel like you have kind of a favorite grade level to teach?
I would have said high school right away.
Yeah.
The year after I got bumped. But it's hard, we do what's called a preference form every year. It doesn't really dictate where you end up, but it lets administration know where you would like to go. And I always put high school thinking I should go back there. And my son is actually graduating from high school this year. So way back when I was like, it'd be great to teach here when my kids are there.
Yeah.
Now living through teenagers, I know that wouldn't have been a good thing. So, I try not to do favorites because, the grass is always greener on the other side. I'd say as far as high school is concerned, I like working with kids at that level because they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I also love teaching the little ones because they're so playful and open to experimentation. But, it's hard to choose between the two.
Yeah, I feel like I've had similar shifts. I used to have the same thing. I always was like, I want to teach high school. I don't want to teach, younger kids. And now I've been at the elementary level for a while and I have a 5-year-old. And I feel like becoming a mom also shifted that for me, wanting to work with the younger kids and just seeing the joy that they bring to the classroom. So yeah, it's hard to pick favorites.
Yeah. And when you're teaching the kindergarten, the elementary, it's such a powerful thing to be a part of this child's life from kindergarten to fourth grade. It's such a huge developmental stage in their life. It's a lot of responsibility and it's super exhausting. Like the pace of elementary is just, I went from teaching high school, let's say I had 4 or 5 classes. You're only talking like 200 kids and you're only seeing them like every other day. When I moved down to elementary, I think I had 850 students. So it was like, the pace is just so much more.
Yeah. And even the energy that you have to kind of bring into each class is more.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Kind of meeting their energy level or sometimes ramping their energy level down a little bit.
Yeah, it's a dance you got to participate in every day.
Oh, totally. Yeah, but I do agree. You talked about it being a big responsibility, and especially from a parent perspective, I see that a lot more now, just seeing how much my daughter reveres her teachers and looks up to them and just loves them.
Yeah. And it's great. It's awesome to have that opportunity. One of the questions you had sent was something about what would you tell a teacher that, you didn't realize when you were in school, and you really can't understand the happiness you can bring a child from just waving to them or being that smile that they see every day or being that sense of security that they get to see every day. And, once you see the kid that doesn't want to go home for Thanksgiving, or
Mm.
gets riled up because the summer's coming and they know they won't have the stability of you and your school. It's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, it can be heartbreaking and heart-opening
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
at the same
Absolutely.
time.
Yes.
And right now, how is your teaching situation? I think you were saying you were hybrid.
We started out the year hybrid, like a
Uh-huh.
blue and red, or an A and B schedule, and then
Mhm.
we quickly moved to all in right after Thanksgiving. The teachers were not happy about it. Obviously, it's an anxiety-ridden kind of situation right now, but we're doing it all. So I teach the kids in front of me, and then we also have an option to be virtual. So I
Mm.
also have my laptop and a Zoom up. So I'm
Mm.
teaching some children at home at the same time that I'm teaching the kids in class.
Oh.
And I lost my classroom because of spacing, and a special ed
Mm.
teacher needed my room. So now I'm on a cart, and we have to be equitable with the kids that are at home material wise.
Mm.
So we're really just using markers, crayons, and pencils. So I really
Mhm.
miss all of the clay and the printmaking and all the different
Mhm.
processes we get to use.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. It's hard, but it is what it is. So I'm trying to keep a good look at it and go for it, but it gets very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot to be juggling both online and in person at the same time, and then also on a cart
Yeah.
with limited materials. It's a lot.
Then you're going into those other teachers' classrooms, and they usually
Mhm.
would have their prep in that classroom during that time. So it's an awkward situation in that regard as well.
Mhm.
And it's hard to get through to the kids that are on the Zoom when you also have the kids in front of you, be giving them enough time and enough attention. So it's exhausting and it's difficult, and I'm hoping it only lasts till the end of this year.
Uh, yeah, I hope so too for you.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of other teachers in that same position. Is there anything that's kind of helping you other than as much as you can, keeping a positive attitude? Are there any tools or tips that are helpful?
I've found that, my team is awesome. So we
Mhm.
have 6 elementary schools. So we've been able to work really closely together, all the art teachers.
Mm.
And so we kind of take turns doing different lessons for different levels. So we're learning a lot from each other.
Mhm.
And we're all video stars now on the internet.
Mhm.
So, and then my team at school, the librarian, the music teacher, and the gym teacher, we are all really great. We all work really well together as well. So, just the
Mhm.
support of those other specialists has really
Mhm.
been what's getting me through it. And the kids still love it, even if you're just using crayons, but
Mhm.
you're limiting it to, something like monochromatic, or you're dealing with color theory, or you're dealing with
Mhm.
different ways to transfer things. The play is still there, but it's hard for them because they're not going into that other environment. Like the art room, it was like this magical place. Now they're just stuck in their classroom all day.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience for them. But I do love how there's still that excitement there.
Yeah.
One printmaking method I've done that maybe you already have done and you know about is the marker printing. That's like the one version of printmaking that I've been able to keep doing during all of this with limited materials, just using like water-based markers on any sort of smooth surface, like foil or a bag or anything, and then, wetting the paper and printing that way.
Huh. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'll have to try that.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's a little bit hit or miss. Like the first time you do it, you'll sort of figure out, is it enough water? Is it too much water? And it all comes out blurry.
Right.
And then I tell them, like, use your muscles. You've got to really
Right.
press, like, give it a good massage. This paper had such a long day.
Right.
Uh,
And what are you using to add the water?
I like to do it with a sponge, just
Ah, okay.
any kind of kitchen sponge, but you could use a spray bottle.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a bunch of videos on YouTube showing different teachers doing it, like whatever their method is.
Right, right. Huh. All right. I'm working on a Romare beard and
Ooh.
canvas module sometime soon, so that might be a really good addition.
Yeah, I like it also as one part of a project. So maybe we print a patterned background because that can sort of withstand a little bit of blurriness or like not printing
Right.
all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you draw back into it or collage with it or kind of play with it in
Right.
so many different ways. And, you brought up Romare Bearden. I'm curious if there's other artists that you're bringing into your classroom and sharing with students and how you're kind of being intentional now about selecting which artists you share.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, being a practicing artist throughout my whole time has really been helpful for me and beneficial to my students because I've always kind of incorporated the historic canon figures, but also a lot of contemporary artists. With the little ones, how much they absorb, there's not much that they absorb. So really it's just getting a face in front of them, and getting the artwork. And now with all these videos that we're putting into Canvas, you can get their actual voices. So
Yeah.
I love Kendi Wiley for portraiture and Mick Thomas. Demographically, the majority of our population is white, but I also have a lot of African Americans and a lot of Hispanic students in my classroom as well. So I like to, include as many artists of color as possible, and as well as women artists.
Yeah. I keep hearing and just thinking about how important it is for all the kids, the white kids as well, to see all of these other people that are not necessarily often represented in the historical canon of art.
Yes.
To see artists of color and female artists.
Right. And I even have a third grader that ever since he was in kindergarten has been saying to me, how come all the artists are French? And I'm like, well, they're not all French. I'm like, sure. Right. I'm like, we got these guys and these guys, but, and, a lot of the more interesting work to them, I think, is work that's happening now, too. I mean, they don't want to just look at, fruit bowls by Cezanne, showing them something by Mick Thomas that has like glitter and beautiful fabrics, or, something by Polly Applebaum that has, just dyed fabrics that are draped over things. I think it really helps me try to teach them we're not just trying to make things that look like things. We're just trying to put things together to see what they end up looking like. Because again, fighting that tendency to want to make the representational is a little bit tricky.
Yeah, and I love the way you put that. We're not just making things that look like things.
Right.
It's a good way to describe it with kids.
Yes. And I tell them, I'm like, listen, if you, went out on the basketball court, do you expect to slam dunk it right away? And they're like, no. And I'm like, exactly. Well, then you're going to draw a face. You can't expect the nose to look exactly right the first time. It just doesn't happen. It takes lots of practice.
Yeah, totally. And then do you also share your own work with students? Do you kind of bring that into the classroom at all?
I usually have like maybe a piece that's a screensaver. So, as I'm closing windows, they might see things once in a while. I was only in 3 little group exhibitions last year, and 2 of them were teacher and student exhibitions. So one was at Tyler School of Art, and you applied with your work, partnered with students' work. And then the other was the same kind of show at a community center near where we live. So, if they're that connected that they, and I post it on both the school website as well as, my own Facebook and stuff. So I think a lot of them see my work that way more than anything else. Don't really have it hanging up in the classroom or anything like that. When I was at the high school level, they were probably hyper aware of what I was doing because they could find me on social media, and I post a lot.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's interesting how some teachers kind of have their social media more locked down or a different name that's harder to find.
Yeah. And I was that way originally. With the high school kids, I always I'm not going to accept your friend request on Facebook until you graduate. That's just a bad idea. But once they graduated, it was awesome because, I'm still in contact with some of my students, and I get to watch what they're doing now, which, wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. And my Instagram, because I want it viewable by everyone, I made that. Originally, it was private, but then I was like, this is the easiest way to show what I'm making. So I need to keep it open. And again, the floodgates just open so everybody's there. And then Facebook now, because I'm in elementary school, parents friend me and, it keeps me honest.
Yeah.
If I have the PTO moms on Facebook, I'm not going to be cursing on there or saying anything stupid.
Right. Yeah. You have to be more careful, more professional.
Yes. And I mean, especially in the last year with all the political up, it kept me posting, good, happy things. I post a lot about my running. I post a lot of nature pictures, animal pictures, and my art.
Yeah.
I like to try to keep social media for fun things.
Yeah. Not all the arguing.
Right. Exactly.
That's something that I've struggled with a little bit. I also have my Instagram public, but then I get nervous sometimes if I'm sharing work that I wouldn't share in the classroom, that I feel like is not totally appropriate for elementary kids. I'm like, is anybody going to see this?
Yes. And again, it makes you hyper aware of what you're putting out into the world. And usually if there was something that was slightly edgy, I feel like since I'm posting it on there versus it's not necessarily through my school district.
Right.
Legally, I'm good,
Right.
I might get some questions or some sideways glances, but I'm the art teacher. I got tattoos on my forearms and a big beard, so they expect me to be a little weird.
Right. I love it. And before we get too far into talking more about your work, could you maybe describe your work?
Yeah, sure. I think of myself as an abstract painter, but I use images to create a relationship or initiate some sort of reaction from the viewer and for my own selfish reasons. Things like boats and water and oceans and mountains and sails and plants, very basic things that everybody can have a connection to. But I'm not concerned with making these things very representational. Everything I do is very humble, I feel like, and it might be categorized as maybe a naive, but for me, I think of it more as like a humble mark because I'm really interested in using basic colors, basic patterns, and basic images just to engage a viewer in a relationship. So a lot of my paintings, or actually at this point, all of my paintings have two circles. So it's kind of like if you put your hands up over your eyeballs and made binoculars. And I think originally it probably came from Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and seeing those things in cartoons. Then it came back into my life maybe I'd say 20 years ago, just by accident through my art. And now I just kind of use that as a device every time. So my secretary, she follows me on Instagram and she says, what are these two circles? And I said, well, they're kind of just to make you think about looking. That's what I want you to think about when you're in front of a painting. What are you doing? You're looking. What are you trying to find? That's not really my problem. You can find whatever you want in my paintings, but I want to engage you in looking. And it's, it's like looking through something, but at the same time, it's something looking back at you.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to ask you about the circles and then you started sharing about them. And I love that. I totally see the binoculars. And then it reminds me also of those scenic spots off of the highway. I'm not sure how much of that exists in the East, but where they've got the little binocular thing.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that connection.
And there's like at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, there's a Duchamp room. And the last piece he made, it's these big brown wooden doors with these two holes that you look through to see this amazing world that he created inside. So I'm sure that had some sort of reference to it as well. And then over, I'd say, the course of the last 5 years, I have pretty much just gone to working on paper and working small and working with water-based mediums. So mainly tempera. And just like the tempera cakes, just like the ones I used in my classroom, and gouache, because I love how the matte finish of the gouache reacts to your eyes, and a lot of pencil. And I've even, now I'm doing pretty much most of my work is, let's say, 7x11. So I've really simplified as far as the materials I'm using. and minimized so that, storage gets out of hand once you've been making art for 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was a tiler, it was always a push for big paintings, which I love to do. But once you have to move them 15 times, you start rethinking your reasons for making things like that.
Yeah.
And then besides the paintings, I make small interactive sculptures that are on wind-up toys, typically. So some of them are wind-up walkers, some of them are wind-up shakers, and those always are mountain-based, and a lot of times they have sails on them, and they kind of go under the umbrella of moving mountains, because I thought that was just kind of, funny, because, we're moving mountains is such an epic idea. And these sculptures I make are, really pathetic. They're like every wind-up toy you get at a cheap dollar store. They fall down. You have to wind them back up. A very small, pathetic joy in watching them try to act out whatever they act out. But again, tinkering. I love to tinker, so I'm either tinkering with these toys and these materials or with my artwork. Or with the paintings. So when I'm making a painting, it's the same thing. I have no idea where I'm going with it. When I start it, I have my materials, I make my circles, and then I start going back and forth. And then usually I come up with, or I fall into the pattern of doing certain things like painting grass or painting vines coming down over the circles. And really, for me, it's just the opportunity to move the material across the page and see where it takes me.
Yeah. And I love these sculptures. I didn't realize until you said it that they're on the wind-up toys. And, I love all the metaphors in there, that these are so tiny, like these little mountains, that they're, like you said, falling over and sort of unstable.
Yes.
But then they're also, it seems like, intentionally a little bit crudely made.
Absolutely. And they're not meant to last. When people try to use them, and we have this thing called Philadelphia Open Studio Tours every year. And me and my wife share a studio at home, but we also have a studio down in the city. And you open up your door and hundreds of people come through because there's hundreds of studios open. And a lot of people bring their kids, and then they see these little toys. And, again, it breaks that barrier of you're not supposed to touch the art, and their kids want to play with them, and then they're always very nervous. I'm like, it's okay if they break it. I'm like, it's meant to not last. It's okay.
I love that. I'd love to see videos of those. I don't know if you have made any little videos.
I just went back. I thought of that same thing.
Yeah.
And so I went back on my other computer, and I had one that I just posted to Instagram and to Facebook today, because I was like, I should throw one of these up. It was for a project at our studio. There's a huge gallery called the Icebox. So it's about, 150 feet long. It's about 60 feet wide, and it's about 50 feet tall. So it used to be a flash freezing facility. And they did, the curators that used to be there would have an open call for a video thing. And so I applied the one time, and this video was chosen. And it was amazing because the video gets posted. It's the size of a football field. So these little sculptures that I can hold in my hand are now 15 feet tall. And it was amazing.
Wow.
But yeah, the videos and the sculptures are always kind of in the back of my head, like, oh, you're not doing these things enough justice. Like, I got to document them and video them, but I always, maybe I shoot a little video and post it on Instagram. I never formalize it. And that's kind of my downfall with everything. I enjoy the making so much that I never get around to the formalizing and getting the stuff out there.
Yeah, it takes up so much time. There's all the time in the studio, but then it's almost equal, or even sometimes it feels like you have to spend more time with all the documenting really nicely and writing and then applying to things and maintaining a website, all these things.
Yeah, exactly.
It becomes a lot.
It really is.
Yeah, I'm also just looking again at your paintings with the circles. Do you mask them off at all?
No, again, I try to draw them. I draw them in one go. I try to do no erasing. So again, when I'm making them, they're always, somewhat wrong. I'm never really trying to make a perfect circle. I'm just trying to draw that line around until it touches again and be okay with it. So yeah, no masking.
Cool. Yeah. And then I see, I don't know if you're using any printmaking methods, but so many of them feel like very aligned with printmaking.
Yeah.
If you're not, it might be something to explore.
Yeah. And there's a couple pieces. I do some relief printmaking. So linoleum. So there's one linoleum plate that I've done 3 different versions of. So a lot of times I'll with the boats as they're touching. So a lot of times I'll print those and then I'll go back into them with paint and pastel and whatnot.
Yeah, I love that. And I like that as something to show students as well. Anytime I teach printmaking, I always teach it as something with so many options that, you can print it again and again, and you can try different colors, and you can like cut it up and draw on top of it and paint on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. And especially at the elementary level, I mean, they are so excited to just print because it's just so quickly satisfying when you just put that down and then you pull that paper off that first time when you're giving the demo to the kids and they're like, what? How did that, And then if you take that one step further and do like a 2-color print, it's like you're a god. They're like, oh my God, how did that happen?
Oh, yes. The magic of printmaking. I love it. I still feel a little bit of that too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's also, but when you get to our level, it gets incredibly frustrating when you're trying to get that perfect print and it just won't do what you want it to do. When I was an undergrad, I had an awesome printmaking teacher, John Dow, and he was a member of the Voodoo religion, and he wore all white. And he was a very dark-skinned African-American guy, and all white. And he would stay so perfectly clean, and I could never understand it. And we had a good relationship, but he always looked at me like, you are such a mess, Bursk. Like, you can never get anything right because there's so many rules and systems to printmaking. If you're in a printmaking class and there's a certain expectation, I always had a hard time matching those expectations because I was always like, well, I could just draw on it now or paint it and then that'll fix it.
Totally. Yeah, I'm definitely a sloppy printmaker.
Yeah.
I definitely relate to that and that imperfection. But I feel like that also connects to like what you were saying about the circles, just drawing it and then there it is and it's not totally perfect and that's okay, or even that's more than okay. That's like part of the meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah. And reacting to it. Like, I mean, it causes you to react in a different way. And you don't know what's going to happen, which is, part of the, what keeps it interesting.
Yeah. Part of the beauty of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like those little imperfections as the viewer make your eye move around and give a little bit more like visual interest as well.
Yeah. I think it slows you down. And I definitely want to do that. You could go to a museum and spend 30 seconds in front of a painting, and that's okay. But I think as the artist, you long for people to engage in your work for a decent amount of time and form a relationship with it. And, by letting all those fumbles happen within the artwork, I think it causes the viewer to engage more as opposed to like they look at it, they get it, and they move on. I want my works to be more like a hike through the forest, than a run to the grocery store.
Yes. That's a great metaphor. I love that. And I mean, you talked a little bit about how you are or are not really handling the business side of all of this. Is there anything that you feel like is helpful or that even maybe that you wish you knew or that you wish you were able to do more of?
Yeah. I mean, I would say what I feel like I need to do is focus more on documentation and document things right when they're done, which will help me 2 ways. I'll have that document to apply to places, but it'll also force me to say, all right, that piece is done. Because a lot of times I'll just keep going in and changing and, keep letting the piece evolve. And, giving yourself just the forgiveness of it's okay to only apply to 3 things in a year. It's okay to take a year off. That stuff's not really dictated by age. So you can always get back into it because, some years I'll apply to 15 things. Some years I'll only apply to 3 things. And, over the course of your career, all those things add up. So, you might not feel like you've done anything for a while, but then when you think back and start writing down where you've been in shows and what you've done, it's fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it all adds up. I love that both of those things hand in hand, trying to basically create better systems to make it easier, like document right when you're done and there we go. But
Right.
then also at the same time, giving yourself that permission and grace to not be constantly having to apply to things.
Yeah. And again, you get different things out of it. I mean, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
have shows all the time, then you're going to have to put in the time. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said before, I have friends that are showing pretty regularly and represented by galleries. And, I'm jealous of those people, but I also understand and see the amount of work they put into those things happening.
Yeah.
And I knew this my father's a poet as well as an English professor.
Oh.
So when I went into painting, he was very upfront with me and was like, listen, there's a lot of rejection involved in this kind of pursuit. And, you just be ready for it. And right when I got out of school, and even right when I got out of grad school, there's a handful of really, you could call them prestigious shows in Philadelphia that are open calls. And, I applied for those year after year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
And I still apply for some of them once in a while. But you got to understand you're not going to get them sometimes. And it has a lot to do with how you're presenting yourself. And like we were saying, the presentation part takes a lot of work. So, you got to weigh your expectations on what makes it worth your while. And for me, making the things really is in the end what makes it worth my while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that with social media, I mean, I post things on Instagram, every time I'm in the studio. So I feel like in some ways I'm showing all the time.
Yes, I know. I love how it's sort of opened up the world for artists a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then do you ever have creative block? And if you do, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I definitely. And I'd say more than block, sometimes I feel like I shouldn't, let's say, be making those circles every time. Certain ways of making kind of become or feel like they're becoming a crutch. And, how do you get past that to the next stage? And I find that just going for it and making a lot of stuff that you throw away or rip up or scribble out or scrape off is the way to work through that. I mean, when I was going through school, looking at artists like Philip Guston and all the Abex painters and, the people that were teaching me, there was a big push on destroy it, put it on, scrape it off, put it on, scrape it off, put it on, scrape it off. And that wrestling match with creativity, because, you're an elementary teacher. So everybody always is like, oh, your job's so fun. You must get to play all day long. This myth that these students walk into my classroom and are like, good morning, Mr. Bursk. What are you going to teach us today? It's like, it's convincing these people to wrestle with creativity. And, it's a wrestling match. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you learn something new each time. And that's kind of what has gotten me through those creative blocks. And I've been lucky enough I met my wife my freshman year in college, and we've been basically sharing a studio and a practice together for 30 years. So we have that close artist relationship where we can really kind of push each other one way or another. And we're very in tune with what the other is doing. So it's kind of having a partner in crime that can help you get to that next spot.
Yeah, that's amazing to have that studio partner, life partner who can kind of help you through all of that.
Yes, very lucky. That Philadelphia Open Studio Tours, when people come through our studio in the city, because we can't spend that much money on it, it's about, say, 6 feet wide, 15 feet long, but very tall. So it's a very small spot. And people come in to see the work and they're like, you guys work here together? And we're like, yeah, she's got that spot on the wall. I have this spot on the wall. And they're like, do you work at the same time? I'm like, yeah, it's like being in the kitchen together. You do this and I do that. And once in a while you can bounce off each other. But it's been incredibly great for both of us.
And I'm just picturing the chefs yelling like, behind.
Yeah, pretty much. Because even though I don't care about messing up when I'm making those lines, I'm enjoying making a straight line. And if she bumped into me and I'm on my 50th line of 100, I'm going to be like, oh no, I'll have to change this whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. Just, picturing that balance and the dance that happens in the studio.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And I also, I love how you're talking about wrestling with the work and, doing that yourself, but then also that our job is to encourage kids to take on that challenge, that wrestle, and keep at it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our job is convincing students that what they're doing is worthwhile. And again, it's not like a math problem, right? I mean, there's not one answer. So they usually think there's one answer in their mind. And I was doing this project last week where we're doing symmetrical shapes and we're cutting the shapes out by, folding the paper in half, drawing half a shape, cutting it out. And then we're gluing it and gluing the positive and the negative on a scribble background that I did with them. And they kept telling me, well, where does this go? Where does this shape go? And I'm like, wherever you want it to go. You're in charge. There's no right way or wrong way. And it's so funny to see how many students, they try to put it back together like a puzzle. And I'm like, we cut that shape out so we could see that shape. Why would you put that shape back where it belongs? And it blows their mind. And I'm like, this is what, the skills that I'm teaching you are cutting, folding, seeing, and drawing. The art is however you want to put it together.
Yeah, that's great. Just seeing how they push against that. I feel like in most of their other classes, they're taught to look for what's the right answer, but teacher, how do I do this? And then the teacher gives them an answer, where this is just full of questions.
Right. Leading to more questions. And that's good. I mean, I tell them, I'm like, that's what learning is, trying things out, seeing what happens, and then making more decisions after that.
Yeah, totally.
And they're like, it's hard, but this is hard. I said, well, yeah, it's school. I was like, if it was easy, it'd be called vacation.
Yeah. And I know whenever I do some kind of demo, I try not to finish it. I'm usually kind of doing it like upside down. Now, the way I have my camera set up, it's still like upside down on my table doing video. Right. But in the classroom, it would be kind of holding it in front of me, like drawing upside down.
Yes. Just trying to show them like how you move your hand around or how you move the material around. How it ends up is, again, it's up to them.
But then also not giving them any like finished work to copy, because there's that tendency to want to copy. So in that way, trying to push them to, like there isn't any finished solution in front of you. You have to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, because they have a very large preconceived notion of what it should be at the end. And I always tell them, I'm like, that's boring. If we watched a football game and we knew who the winner was going to be, why would we watch it? It's just done. We watch it maybe because it's interesting to see it happening. And that's what's interesting about, making art. You get to witness this kind of growth happen in front of your eyes.
Yeah. Our little pandemic bubble includes some neighbor families. Like we're in a big building. So the people that kind of share our building. And I've been doing, a couple of times I've done little art projects with my daughter and some of her little friends, and just seeing the variety, seeing some of them really pushing each other like, that doesn't look like a face, that's supposed to be a person. And then the other kid kind of pushing back and being like, it's my kind of face. Like I'm creating this the way I want it to look. And I'm all about that. I'm like, yes, it doesn't have to look like what you think a face should look like.
Right. Yeah, we just did a monochromatic portrait project school-wide, and I let them pick whatever color they wanted to use. And then they used, markers and crayons and colored pencils. So I guess it was about, 500 to 600 portraits when they're done. And since every kid could pick their own color, when I hung them up in the hallway, all up against each other, doing the whole spectrum. So kindergarten and fourth grade and third grade and second and first, they're all intermingled. So it's really interesting to see, how these different age levels create the face. Yeah. And it's the older kids that really, really give me a hard time about noses. And I'm always like, there's more than one way to draw a nose.
Yes.
And then I tell them, it's about the color. This project is about color. You could draw a smiley face and it would be successful if you used monochromatic color. Try to give them some other thing to hang on to. and to let the image be secondary.
Yeah, I love that focus on color. And you talked about your studio a bit. I was curious if the pandemic has affected you being able to be in the studio at all. Was there a time where you weren't able to go, or has it pretty much been okay and open the whole time?
When we were in lockdown, we didn't go really, just because we were really, and still are, trying to cut out anything I don't have to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But luckily, I have a small studio right across the hallway from my bedroom.
Oh, nice.
So it's got, my drawing table, and it's got a wall that I can put my stuff on. So I was able to continue to work because I have the space at home. They opened up pretty quickly at my studio building because once they got all the health and safety precautions that they needed to, it's not a real crowded place. And, if you just go in and go to your studio, it's just you. And then they limited the bathroom. Now we knock on the bathroom. If somebody's in there, you wait for them to leave and then you go in. There's a lot of galleries and businesses on the first floor. So a lot of that was closed down, but the studios were open.
Nice. I feel like so many artists had to really shift how and where they work.
Yeah.
All the practical decisions, maybe moving to smaller work on paper could also be part of that.
Right. Yeah. And for me, luckily, I had already simplified down to that stuff. And again, like I said, I'm lucky enough that I have a big enough house where I have allotted spaces for those kind of activities.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really felt for those people, especially ceramicists who had to learn how to work in their apartments and whatnot. It's such a battle. And again, with everything right now, it's all about just holding out. And it seems like we're getting there. We're almost there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So close.
I posted one of my memories that popped up on Facebook today was a picture of me and my wife at a benefit show that we were in. And there were just hundreds of people, in one room. Those times were so good. You didn't know how good we had it.
Yeah, it's so strange to think back and, see those pictures and, now you're immediately just thrown off by those pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also curious about scheduling and kind of how you fit in art making alongside teaching. I guess we talked about sort of the seasons and the times, but more on a day-to-day, what does a week look like for you?
We're weekend warriors down in the city.
Yeah.
We try to get down there at least once a weekend. That way we feel like we're not just sending money to the realtor and we're getting our money's worth. And it's just nice to get down there for, 4 or 5 hours and not be able to put laundry in or do dishes or, everything's removed, which is why we decided, I guess about 10 years ago now, that we needed to rent a space. Number one, nobody's coming out to our house to see our art. So by committing to a studio down there, it forces us to really, be engaged more. And then as far as the workday is concerned, you're exhausted by the end of the day. When I got bumped down to elementary, I could not keep up with these kids. And I'm not a go to the gym kind of guy. So a friend of mine talked me into start running. And I fell in love with running and have been doing, build up to marathons and ultra marathons and things like that.
Amazing.
So that has helped me kind of create or be in a schedule. So if I'm training for something, I know how much time I need to go out and run for. And that in turn has helped me kind of situate my studio. So when I come out of the shower, after working all day, after making dinner for the family, and then after going out for a run, taking a shower, I got to the rhythm where I can go into my studio for a half hour and do a little bit before I sit down to watch TV.
Yeah, I love all of that. And you have 2 kids?
Yes. So my daughter's 20. She's a sophomore at Temple in the education department. So she's going to the family business. And my son's a senior in high school and he just got accepted to local college. He wants to be a farmer. He's going to go to school for agriculture.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So that, I guess, having them old enough that you can kind of let them be, or, your daughter's probably off at college or maybe at home.
She's actually been home for the last year.
At home. Yeah.
But yeah. And that was another thing that I knew was coming, the openness of my schedule. So again, my dad being a poet, he prepared me for that once I had kids. He was like, listen, you're going to feel like you don't have any time to do anything, but hold the course because eventually it's going to come around and you're going to have a lot more time.
Yeah.
And I feel like between getting my feet centered in teaching elementary and my kids getting older, I feel like I'm going into a really good spot to really up my game as far as reaching out for opportunities and documenting my work and things like that. Because when I had little kids, as you know, I'm sure it takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of your time.
It sure does.
Yeah. When I went to grad school, I had my daughter in 2000, had my son in 2002. I started a part-time 3-year program in 2001. So I went through a 3-year grad program for painting while I was raising 2 very young children.
Wow.
So that, as far as struggling to keep up a studio practice, especially one that's being evaluated and you're earning a grade for and you're taking loans for, that really kind of set the standard for, all right, I'm devoted to this. No matter what I need to do, I got to find time. And at this point, I feel like I'm in a really good spot where I'm doing these small paintings. There's just a cup of water and a brush and a pack of temperas. So it's very easy to kind of come in and give myself, a half hour, or some nights it's an hour. Sometimes it's 2 hours. So that's kind of how I've been able to schedule it.
Yeah, doing a grad program with 2 babies and toddlers.
It was intense.
That's a lot. Ooh.
I don't know what I was thinking. And then I talked my wife into going back to school right after that. And she went to Rutgers and did a full-time program. So then she was doing a full-time program at Rutgers, and I still had like a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's heartening to hear from people who've kind of made it through. You're on the other end of this and seeing your time open up a bit. Yeah, it's something that I'm looking towards.
Yeah, right. You don't want them to grow up too fast, but at the same time, it's okay to celebrate and envision that future.
Yeah.
Because it's coming no matter what, right?
Right. You can't stop it. You can't slow it down.
No.
Yeah, I've been loving seeing my daughter get older and be able to do more of her own thing, like be more independent and also just have such personality. Yeah, it's definitely bittersweet.
Yeah.
Seeing that growth and being like, oh, my baby.
Right.
But then also she has more freedom. I have more freedom.
Right. You got to find the good in it. By next fall, if they can go to college again, then, I could be an empty nester for the first time. And, we're like, oh, that's going to be awesome and weird at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that must feel so strange.
Absolutely. Same when my daughter was away for a year, but then once COVID happened and school went online, she's been back now for close to a year as well, which has been awesome. But, I'm looking forward for her to be able to go out and do all those things.
Yeah, I feel like this is all really hard on kids and on young people, especially.
Yeah, I think their lives have been really the most turned upside down, frankly. And they've done an amazing job adapting. Even the elementary students that I have full time, for them to be able to wear a mask for that long, these are 5-year-olds. That's their first time in school. It's a lot to ask. It's a lot for them to deal with.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody recently about how flexible and how that ability to adapt in this generation, what that's going to mean for the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good for them in the end. I think they're going to be able to use that because I think they're going to need it.
Yeah. And I feel like that almost maybe leads into, I just have some fun kind of wrap-up questions. So one is really sort of big, open-ended. What are you curious about right now?
What am I curious about right now? Well, like I said, I've fallen in love with running, so I'm very curious about how far I can actually run. I'm training for my second 50-miler right now.
Wow.
So those adventures have been really fun and painful at the same time, which pushes me into my studio practice and makes me curious about, all right, so especially in 2020, I've made all these small paintings that are similar and the similar size, materials, subject matter. I'm curious to see how I can wrap them up into a concise, whether it's in a book form or an exhibition or so that it's not just one at a time on a studio wall. It's the whole ensemble together. And so I'm really curious to kind of take a wider look at the work that I've made over the course of the last year or two and see what I see.
Yeah, that's a great sort of reflective practice. And then putting it all together. I love the idea of a book, or maybe it ends up taking the form of some kind of installation or Yeah,
exactly. Which again, those kind of curiosities I'm hoping will push me to do it, sit in front of the computer again and scan things and shoot things properly and those kind of things.
All the grunt work.
Yes. I need an intern.
Right. Totally. Okay. Fun, kind of silly question. What is your favorite food?
I'm a Philly boy, so I'm going to say soft pretzels.
Oh, yeah. Yum. And last couple things, is there anyone that you'd want to thank or give a shout out to?
Sure. I mean, I shout out to my wife, Danielle Bursk, and my kids, Josie and Tyler, my whole family, and then my whole team at Neshaminy, all the awesome art teachers I get to work with, and the awesome specialist teachers I get to work with at Hoover. And my students. I mean, again, they give me so much. Yeah.
Beautiful. And last thing, where can our listeners connect with you online?
My Instagram is at JJ Bursk, and Facebook is Justin Bursk, and my website is justinjosephbursk.com. But Instagram is the best place because I post way too much. They'll know where I ran, how far I ran, what marks I made that night, what colors I'm using. I like to be interactive with my posting.
Awesome. I love that, though. And I will link to all of that as well. So
awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Justin.
No problem. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can reach me at Teaching Artist Podcast on Instagram or teachingartistpodcast@gmail.com. Who do you want to hear from? Please share your recommendations of teaching artists. And if you loved this episode, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow me. It really makes a big difference. Thank you.